It is often the case that people living in richer and more developed countries emit more than those in lower income countries. However, what if this isn't the end of the story? What if low carbon prosperity was not only possible, but achievable realistically? To answer this question, we use the World Emissions Clock, a novel tool by the World Data Lab, which reports and visualizes global greenhouse gas emissions and projects it into the future. We use its sectoral breakdown feature to imagine a new country, which models every sector of its economy based on a high-income country with particularly low emissions intensity in the given sector. We adjusted the rankings to ensure replicability, validity, and realistic groupings, keeping in mind variable production needs and capacities of different countries. And the result? Meet Prosperia, made of 5 best practice economies. Now let's see what life is like in Prosperia. Agriculture in Prosperia is modeled around South Korea, whose strong reforestation programs have been driving carbon removals from the land use change, and forestry, or LULUCF sector since the 1960s. In 2022, its emissions related to agriculture, land use change, and forestry are negative 0.41 tons per capita, making it a carbon sink. Here, the staple food is rice, which has lower emissions footprints compared to meat, fruit, and vegetables. Buildings in Prosperia are modeled around Sweden, who have been setting an example since the 1960s in their low-energy building standards. Energy efficiency improvement programs see Prosperia's buildings widely implementing state-of-the-art technology, from thick insulation to triple glazing, resulting in per capita greenhouse gas emissions of 0.12 tons in 2022. The energy sector in Prosperia takes inspiration from Spain, who have remarkably low per capita emissions from the sector while having a diversified electricity generation system, relying more or less equally on wind power, hydrothermal power, nuclear power, and fossil fuels, the last of which are projected to become less and less. Due to its use of diverse energy sources, Prosperia produces 2.04 tons per capita in 2022. Next up, the industry sector in Prosperia is modeled more closely around the UK, implementing its decarbonization strategy involving the addressing of barriers, implementing carbon pricing, fuel switching, and carbon leakage mitigation solutions into industrial infrastructure. Partly also due to offshoring, a part of its industrial activity, Prosperia manages to emit 1.05 tons per capita in 2022. And finally, Prosperia's transport sector mimics that of the Netherlands. Here, all-electric passenger trains use green energy, with buses also planned to reach 100% green energy in the coming years. Thanks to Dutch-style fuel mix policy and measures to increase EV infrastructure, as well as almost 30% of trips done over bicycles, Prosperia's transport sector emits 1.85 tons per capita in 2022. So what does Prosperia produce in total emissions per capita in 2022? 4.66 tons. When we compare that to the average of the world, the EU, the OECD, and the US, we see that just by rearranging the puzzle, high-income countries can cut greenhouse gas emissions by more than a half. When we project Prosperia into the future, we see how much closer replicating best practices can get us to a world where NDCs go from promise to reality. Prosperia doesn't rely on some future tech or on unattainable living standards. It isn't fiction. It can be our future. Learning from their neighbors, sharing technology, and best practices may prove to be the best way for high-income countries and economies that are catching up to address global warming for good.